Before we start, tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. Now, keep your eyes on one simple test we will use all night. Real government orders leave a trail in at least 3 places at once: in the clerk's docket, in the jail log if someone is arrested, and in the treasurer's payables. If any order shows up without that triple trail, treat it as a red flag. The year is 1904 on the Ozark Borderlands. The courthouse sits over a stone basement that smells like wet paper. In the recorder's office, a junior clerk named Ruth Eller files civil orders by number, date, subject, and seal. Her routine is rigid because the judge's chamber is 5 steps away, and the judge likes to grab a random docket and quiz her. On a Monday morning, Ruth receives Order 2179, County v. Lattimore, authorizing seizure of a wagon and 2 mules for unpaid road tax. She stamps the top corner with the date, checks the judge's signature, and turns the page toward the light to see the watermark that the county adopted to stop casual forgeries. The watermark is there, a faint county shield in laid paper. She notes the seal, a circular emboss with an eagle and the county motto around it. She enters the order in the ledger and hands it to a runner. 2 hours later, she receives Order 2179 again. Same case name, same subject, same date, same signature. The paper feels right. The watermark is there. But the seal is not. This one bears a different emboss, an eagle without the county motto and a narrower rope border. To an untrained eye, it is nothing. To Ruth, it is wrong. She fetches the first copy and places them side by side with a ruler. The signatures track each other perfectly. The numbering at the bottom right matches down to the slight tilt of the 9. The ink color is identical. Only the emboss differs. She calls for the county attorney. The county attorney, Abram Voss, has a habit of asking for the simplest proof first. He asks Ruth to read the seal captions aloud. The first is County of Official Seal. The second is Seal of the County Court. He asks if either stamp appears anywhere else in the last month. Ruth checks the log. The official seal emboss appears 61 times. The seal of the county court emboss appears only on the second Order 2179. Voss walks the second copy to the judge. The judge looks once and tells Voss to find the die. Every seal in the building comes from a die, either a desk embosser or a heavy press in the basement print room. If both dies exist in this courthouse, there is a policy problem. If one die exists in this building and the other exists somewhere else, there is a criminal problem. Voss goes downstairs. In the basement, the county's contracted printer, Mr. Showalter, runs the big hand press that makes blank forms with pre-numbered corners. He also guards the embossers that imprint ribbons for marriage licenses and court orders. Voss asks for the seal dies. Showalter produces a locked drawer with the official die inside, round, steel, with the eagle and the motto. He cannot produce the second die. He says he has never seen it. He swears he has not loaned the official die to anyone. Voss asks to see the sequentially numbered blank forms used for court orders. Showalter shows a stack banded by twine, forms 2101 through 2200. Order 2179 should have come from that stack. Voss checks the band. It has been retied. He asks for the imprint register. Showalter produces a notebook that logs which number ranges were printed on which day. The notebook shows 2101, 2200, printed on Thursday, delivered Friday. No shrinkage, no spoilage. Voss notes that no shrinkage is a claim printers rarely make. He pockets the claim and moves on. The sheriff's office sits across the hall from the recorder. The arrest side of Order 2179 is simple. If a judge signs a seizure order, a deputy attaches property and lists it in the seizure log with time, location, and deputy name. Sheriff Caro flips through the log. There is no entry for Lattimore. Caro checks the daily call sheet for that morning. No deputy signed out toward Lattimore's farm. Caro is not a man who likes paperwork, but he respects it when it keeps him out of court. He walks with Voss back to the clerk's desk and stares at the two seals without speaking. He tells Voss he wants to know who is issuing documents that move his men around without his signature under it. Now the Telegraph enters our story. This county adopted a challenge and acknowledgment code with the nearest circuit court after a mess 2 years earlier with a forged writ. When a warrant or seizure order is urgent, the clerk sends a challenge wire to the circuit office, a 4-word phrase from a pre-printed table and a 3-digit counter. The circuit clerk replies with the correct response word and counter. That code proves the order is live and the judge is in the building. Ruth checks the Telegraph book. No challenge went out for Order 2179. No response came back. Either someone forgot the code or someone avoided it because a code adds weight that is hard to fake. Voss asks Ruth to pull the last week of orders that involved property or arrest. 81 items. They sort them into official seal and seal of the county court. Only 2 bear the second seal. He makes copies of those 2 and writes the case names on a separate page. One involves a liquor license suspension. One involves a road grading dispute. Both would move money if obeyed. Their next stop is the treasurer. If a second seal exists to build a shadow trail, the cleanest motive is a second pay stream. Treasurer Lyman keeps the county's payables, payroll, and journal of special funds, such as road districts. Voss asks for the last month of outflows tied to court orders. Lyman brings binders to the table. Within minutes he points to something that makes sense only if you work with numbers every day. He shows 2 warrants to the same payee for printing and forms, both posted on the same day, both for small sums that will not draw newspaper attention. One bears the official voucher stamp. One bears a different voucher stamp, a rectangle with Order of County Court at the top, and a seal impression that matches the second emboss. Lyman says he did not stamp the rectangle. He does not own a rectangular voucher stamp. They need a sample of the rectangular stamp on a document that did not pass through Lyman's hands. Voss asks the jailer. If the second seal is part of a real system, it will have touched the jail in the form of commitments or releases. Jailer Merritt keeps a clean book for a man who runs a crowded place. He is proud of it and protective of it. He shows Voss the intake and release for the last 30 days. 16 commitments, 16 seals of the official type, no rectangular voucher stamps, no county court emboss. Merritt frowns because he has his own routine that spots trouble fast. He posts a summary sheet by the office door that lists today's bodies and the papers that justify each body. If the second seal were real and moving people, he would see it there. He has not. At this point, Voss has 4 key facts that can be presented without drama. First, 2 versions of Order 2179 exist with different seals. Second, the print shop denies a second die and claims no shrinkage of numbered blanks that would allow ghost orders. Third, the sheriff and jail show no activities traceable to the second seal. Fourth, the treasurer saw a strange rectangular voucher and an emboss that matches the second seal on a payment he did not issue. The 5th fact comes to him while he is still in the jail. If fake orders exist, someone is distributing them and someone is collecting on them. That requires a schedule, a room, and paper that looks right at first glance. He starts to work the paper supply. Real court orders in this county use laid paper with the county watermark, a blue ribbon for binding when long exhibits are attached, and a paper number hidden in the binding margin. The ribbon colors rotate by quarter to block reuse. The current quarter is blue. Next quarter will be red. Ruth brings Voss a stack of trimmed margins from last week's orders. Each margin shows a tiny hand-stamped letter the print room uses to match paper today. A for Monday, B for Tuesday, and so on. Showalter the printer says that habit is his own idea. Voss takes one of the second seal orders and carefully peels back the ribbon area. The hand-stamped letter is wrong for the date on the face. The order says Monday. The binding margin carries a D. D is Thursday. Either the clerk's desk stamped the wrong date 3 days in a row, or someone assembled an order later and backdated it. Voss goes to the telegraph office with Ruth's challenge book. The operator, Mr. Coalfield, keeps a private log of every county code exchange. He is a former railroad man and does not let pages go missing. Voss asks for the log covering the 2 dates with second seal orders. No challenges appear. Coalfield adds one detail that matters for later. The challenge table the county uses changes at the start of every month. The table for May is different from April. A person forging orders who does not know the new table will avoid sending a challenge. Coalfield also mentions a night wire from 3 weeks back with a phrase he has never seen on county business. Seal room moved. The message came from the station west of town at 10:12 p.m., addressed to a name he did not recognize, paid in cash. He kept the telegram because it smelled wrong. Voss reads the wire and puts it in his pocket. Back to the print room. Showalter, pressed by the margin letter mismatch, admits that he had a small amount of spoilage on the 2101-2200 run, and that he printed a replacement strip late on Thursday. He says he fed the replacement forms into the stack and rebanded it. That could explain why a Monday-dated order carries a Thursday margin letter if the forms were replaced after the original delivery. Ruth points out a simpler read. Someone pulled Thursday forms and wrote Monday on top to hide a late fabrication. Showalter bristles. He offers his coin marks as proof. Every time he locks a form into the chase, it leaves light pressure marks in the corners that are hard to copy. He shows Voss where to look. Both versions of Order 2179 carry Showalter's coin marks. That means both sheets were printed on his press. It does not mean both sheets were embossed with his die. They need to find the second die. Dies do not travel in a pocket easily. They are steel or brass and heavy. The courthouse has only one secure place to store such a thing, the strong drawer in the print room. If a second die is in town, it lives somewhere with its own routine. Voss thinks about offices that use seals daily and can hide one blunt object in a sea of other blunt objects. He thinks about banks and notaries. He thinks about the county court itself, but the judge's embosser sits on the desk and is the official one. He narrows to notaries and to the one private office that stamps more paper than any other. The land agent who does tax sales and quitclaims every spring. The land agent's name is Sully Dobbs. His office is above the feed store. His desk is a shallow field of stamps, inks, and hand presses. Voss walks in with Sheriff Caro and asks to see Dobbs's notary seal. Dobbs smiles and hands over a small handheld embosser with his name. Voss asks if Dobbs owns any other presses. Dobbs says no. Caro looks past him at a wooden crate by the stove with tissue paper rising out. Inside the crate is a second embosser wrapped in tissue. Caro picks it up. It is heavy and clean. The die shows an eagle without a motto and a rope border. Around the edge it reads, "Seal of the County Court." Dobbs says he was keeping it safe for the court. He cannot explain why the court would need a notary to store its seal. Caro sets the embosser on Dobbs's desk and writes the serial number etched on the side. Voss brings the embosser back to the courthouse. Showalter takes a scrap and squeezes. The emboss matches the second seal orders exactly. Ruth lays the two 21/7 dimes side by side and calls out the ring depth and eagle beak angle like a technician. It is a match. Now they have the die. They still need the room. The room turns out to be a night school classroom. The county rents the schoolhouse for evening functions to bring a little money into the teacher fund. The janitor, Mr. Pike, signs out keys and writes who used the room. Ruth checks the book. 3 recent nights show Court Auxiliary Committee as renter with a tidy hand that uses the old-style long S in words like session. The renter paid cash. Pike remembers 2 men and a woman carrying a bundle of blank forms and a travel case shaped like a press. He remembers because he had to wipe wax off the teacher desk the next morning, and he found in the waste bin strips of blue ribbon. They recreate the workflow step by step. Showalter's press produced the pre-numbered blanks. Someone pulled enough blanks for a small run. In the schoolroom, a team filled in names and dates, used blue ribbon from the county supply, and embossed with the Dobbs embosser. They did not send telegraph challenges because they did not know the table. They issued copies to targeted recipients: a liquor board, a road grader, and in our test case, a deputy who never saw the order. They then routed payment vouchers to the treasurer with the rectangular stamp to normalize the paper trail. Where did they get a rectangular stamp that said Order of County Court? They made it. Showalter's typecase has everything needed to build a rubber stamp. He says he never built one. He is probably lying or scared. Voss decides not to corner him yet. He wants the person paying for this, not the person who knows how to set type. The last piece in Chapter 1 is a person with access to both schedules: the county minute book that lists which boards meet when, and the bank schedule that shows which days the county cuts checks. If a shadow group wants to ride the real calendar, it needs those 2 rails. The only desk that sees both without asking is the judge's secretary. She prepares the weekly court calendar and picks up signed warrants from the treasurer twice a week. Her name is Lena Paxton. She is steady, quiet, and unbothered by men who raise their voices. Voss asks her to list the 3 evenings the schoolroom was used by the Court Auxiliary Committee. She does without comment. He asks whether anyone ever requested the court seal for off-site use. She says no and looks at his hands to see if he is shaking. He is not. He thanks her and walks back to Ruth's desk. He tells Ruth to prepare certified copies of both versions of Order 2179, the telegraph log for that date, the treasurer's 2 printing and forms warrants, the janitor's keybook pages, and a photograph of the Dobbs embosser imprint. He says very clearly that nothing leaves her sight without his signature until the judge signs a seizure for the second die and for any stamp found in the schoolroom closet. He steps to the judge's door and knocks. Voss lays both versions of Order 2179 on the desk and requests an immediate seizure order for the second seal die and any unofficial stamps. The judge signs. The clerk prepares the writ. Start with a second test as strict as the first. Real lawmen leave 4 trails at once: a badge number issued by the sheriff, a signature on the monthly muster, ammunition drawn from supply, and time recorded on a payroll warrant that the treasurer pays. If any deputy appears only on money and never on the other three, he is a name built for cash. Treasurer Lyman laid out the county's payroll books on a long table and cleared his throat. He kept 2 ledgers for wages. One was the main register, road crews, clerks, jail staff, and sworn deputies. The second ledger held pass-throughs and special appropriations. He slid both toward Voss and Sheriff Caro. The regular deputies' page showed the usual rhythm of county life. Names the sheriff knew, badge numbers he had issued, even sums with coin cents rounded down to save trouble at the window. Then Lyman opened the pass-through ledger to a section labeled in tidy script, Court Auxiliary. Under that heading sat a roster of 9 men paid deputy allowance on the 15th and the 30th. The amounts were neat, the voucher numbers sequential, and each line bore a rubber rectangle at the edge. Order of County Court. Caro read the 9 names aloud. He did not recognize 3 of them. He recognized 4 as surnames from families that had no adult sons in service. 2 were surnames that appeared often on tax rolls, but never on his muster. He tapped the badge column. The pass-through roster did not list badge numbers. He flipped to his own muster and badge register. No match for the 9. He turned to Voss and said the only sentence a sheriff should need to say to move a judge. I did not swear these men. Lyman kept a tight voucher trail. Each payroll run produced envelopes and a pay window log. If cash was picked up at the treasurer's window, the recipient signed. If the warrant was directed to the bank next door for convenience, the bank stamp and teller initials appeared in the margin. He showed a pattern that made sense if you wanted to pull money quietly. The regular deputies signed in person at the window, often with a smudge of dust on the line and a complaint about the ink. The court auxiliary vouchers went to the bank, all 9 at once, teller initial K, no individual signatures, and the rectangular rubber stamp that Lyman did not own. Voss and Caro crossed the square to the bank. Farm and Mercantile kept a tidy book and a tidy lobby. Teller K was a man named Kent who blushed on command. Voss asked about bulk deputy disbursements. Kent said those were handled as a single envelope to Court Auxiliary Paymaster, paid against a county warrant, then broken up at the pay window in the rear office. Kent produced the back office log. 9 lines, no names. The receipt column read, Paymaster only. The disbursement column listed even bills packed in paper bands. Voss asked who the paymaster was. Kent said a man with a soft hat who signed H. Lowe for receipt. Kent described him as average height with a scar on his left cheek. Caro wrote the description and the name with no comment. Hiram Lowe was a runner for land agent Sully Dobbs. The sheriff's supply book held another test. Deputies draw ammunition by count and leave a signature. They also draw belts, cuffs, and sometimes boots on a charge. The month against which the auxiliary payroll ran showed nothing new. No extra boxes of 38 rounds, no extra leather, no extra boots. Caro turned the pages slowly, then closed the book with 2 fingers. If 9 men carried county pay as deputies, they carried it without bullets or belts. Next, they checked the jail. Jailer Merritt kept his intake book like an accountant, because when bodies are wrong, trouble arrives with speed. He ran a finger down the arresting officer column for the last 30 days. He read out Caro, Tate, Willis, Keener, and 2 constables from outside precincts. None of the 9 auxiliary names appeared. Merritt pointed at the release log. No one left on a signature by any of the 9. He took the pass-through roster and held it like a stranger's hand. If they worked, he said, they worked on paper only. Telegraph operator Cole Field brought out his challenge book again because orders that send men into the field are supposed to be coded. He confirmed no challenges were sent under any court auxiliary header. He then produced a private slip he had saved because it irritated him. 3 days before a payroll run, a wire came from west of town. Auxiliary muster confirm at usual room, 7 p.m. No code and no county billing. Paid cash. Addressed to L. The station clerk remembered the sender as a woman with a stiff jaw in a black hat. Voss tucked the slip under his folder clip. If ghost deputies are being paid, someone buys their badges. The county had only one blacksmith who made star badges and ovals that could pass in lamplight. His name was Harlan, and he liked metal because it told the truth when heated. Harlan's order book showed a cash sale 2 months ago for 9 star badges with "Deputy" across the bar. The order did not request numbers, which real deputies prefer to have stamped. The buyer brought a sample star with a rope edge and asked Harlan to match it. He paid with a banknote and did not leave a name. Harlan kept the paper pattern he used for spacing the word. He laid it on the table. The rope edge on the sample matched the edge on the second seal die. Voss did not say coincidence. He paid Harlan for the pattern and put it with the Dobbs embosser photograph. Names on payroll without badges, ammo, or arrests should still leave footprints at day's end. Deputies sleep somewhere. The boarding house on the square kept a tally of men who took the law rate. The matron had no 9 strangers and no extra plates set on pay nights. The livery kept a log of animals hired by title. No deputy rides increased on muster nights. The court calendar that Lena Paxton kept showed no special sessions where 9 extra men would be needed to keep order. Ghost deputies existed between ledgers and a bank rear office and nowhere else. Lyman wanted a clean figure for the judge. He totaled the auxiliary payouts for 2 months. The number was not enormous, which is how you hide a theft. It was steady and just under the amount that would make the paper. He then pointed to 2 small outflows posted the day after each auxiliary run. Both vouchers went to printing and forms, endorsed by the rectangular stamp, Teller K, received by H. Lowe. Those small sums could pay for ribbon, rubber, and time in a night room. Voss pulled the land agent thread again because 2 lines now touched him: badges and paymaster. He and Caro climbed the stairs over the feed store and found Dobbs polishing his glasses as if they were law. Voss put the court auxiliary ledger page on the desk and asked plainly whether Dobbs knew a man named Hiram Lowe. Dobbs said yes, as a runner. Voss asked whether Lowe ever ran cash on behalf of county business. Dobbs said not with his knowledge. Caro asked whether badges were ever stored in Dobbs's office. Dobbs said no. Caro opened the cabinet behind him and revealed a wooden tray with 7 star badges wrapped in tissue. The rope edge on each matched Harlan's sample. Dobbs said they were for a theatrical company. Voss did not waste a question on that. If someone is building a second payroll, someone is also building a second path into the treasurer's office. Lyman's door used a key that 3 people carried: Lyman, his deputy cashier, and the janitor who swept after hours. The deputy cashier was a steady man named Beacon, who liked numbers and disliked talk. He confirmed that on auxiliary days he delivered a sealed warrant envelope to the bank with Lyman's signature and returned with the stamped stub. He also confirmed that, twice, a woman in a black hat had waited at the corner and walked in behind him to the bank. She stood 3 steps back while Kent counted. She did not speak. She left with the man who signed H. Lowe. Beacon remembered her because her gloves had ink on the fingers like a clerk's. Voss returned to Lena Paxton because if a black-gloved clerk was involved, the pool of suspects narrowed. Lena knew every hand that inked the judge's calendar. She had no black hat and no patience for men who thought she did not notice hats. She said the only woman in town whose gloves often carried ink was Ruth Eller, who filed orders. Voss told Lena that Ruth was the one who spotted the second seal in the first place. Lena considered that, then offered a second name. The Liquor Board's recording secretary, a widow named Agnes Pell. Pell sent minutes to the printer every month. Pell could move forms and ribbon without questions. Pell also attended night functions and wrote in a hand that used the old-style long S when she signed Session. Lena said she had the sign-out sheet from the schoolhouse again. The Court Auxiliary Committee renter had signed A. Pell on one of the nights. They interviewed Agnes Pell that afternoon in the Liquor Board room, not at her home. She sat upright and did not ask for a lawyer because the county could not afford to provide one in a room like this. Voss placed the Dobbs embosser photograph, Harlan's badge pattern, the bank rear office log, and the pass-through ledger in a neat row, and asked whether she recognized any object. Pell said she recognized the shape of the embosser because every meeting agenda in the county wore the official seal somewhere on it. She said she did not know Harlan. She said the bank was not her business. She said the ledger looked like every ledger. Voss asked whether she had rented the schoolroom under Court Auxiliary Committee. Pell looked at the janitor's sign-out copy and said she must have miswritten the heading when a club used the room to plan a temperance rally. Lena, who stood in the doorway, shook her head once, very slightly. While Voss pushed paper, Caro ran the street. He put a deputy on the bank rear door for the next auxiliary day. He put another deputy in the telegraph office to read the West Line wires as they came. He instructed the blacksmith to send word if a repeat order for stars came in. He told the livery to hold any horses hired by a party that included a man with a soft hat and a woman in a black hat. He told Merritt to log any arresting officer who was not a sworn deputy and to telegraph him before accepting a prisoner on an unknown signature. The auxiliary day came 3 afternoons later. Lyman prepared the regular payroll window and sealed the auxiliary warrant for the bank as the books required. Beacon walked it across the square. Deputy Tate watched the rear office through the frosted glass. Teller Kent took the envelope and counted. Hiram Lowe signed Paymaster. The woman in the black hat did not appear. Lowe took the packet and went out the side door. Tate followed him into the alley and watched him walk not to Dobbs's stairs, but to the feed store yard, where a traveling wagon stood with its canvas tied down. Lowe put the packet into the wagon chest and tapped twice on the sideboard. The canvas moved. A gloved hand took the packet. The wagon rolled. Tate stepped into the yard and lifted the canvas when it passed the gate. Inside sat Agnes Pell and a wooden tray of star badges wrapped in tissue. They did not arrest anyone in the yard. Tate backed away and lifted his hat to a farmer passing by as if he had only stopped to tie his boot. He let the wagon turn onto the street and told a boy to fetch Caro. The sheriff and Voss met the wagon at the courthouse steps, not in the alley. Caro asked for the packet by name. Pell handed it over without protest. Voss broke the band and counted 9 equal pay bundles, each with a slip for a deputy name from the auxiliary roster. He asked Pell why the slips bore no badge numbers. Pell said she did not know about badges. He asked Lowe why he signed Paymaster. Lowe said he was asked to carry envelopes. He asked who asked. Lowe said he could not say, because he had given his word. Caro placed his hand on Lowe's elbow and repeated the question until Lowe pointed upstairs to Dobbs's office with a single finger. They walked the packet and the tray of stars into the judge's chamber and laid them beside the two versions of Order 2179. Lyman brought the pass-through ledger and the bank rear office log. Coalfield brought the telegraph slip that read, "Auxiliary muster confirm." Harlan brought the paper pattern. Merritt brought the jail intake page for the month with no ghost arrests. Ruth brought the duplicate seal impressions. Lena stood in the back and watched hands. The judge did not hold a speech. He issued 3 narrow orders on paper that could survive any appeal. First, an immediate freeze on any county warrant bearing the rectangular Order of County Court stamp with notice to the bank. Second, a seizure of the Dobbs embosser and any stamp or ribbon found in the night school closet or in the land agent's office to be cataloged against serial marks. Third, a show cause order for Agnes Pell and Hiram Lowe to explain within 2 days why they handled county funds without authority. He handed the papers to Ruth with a pen, and she walked them down the hall to the treasurer and across the square to the teller window. Use one more strict test tonight. Real custody of public records leaves a triangle, a judge's written order, the clerk's receipt with box counts, and the janitor's key log with times and names. If any box of files leaves the building without all 3, someone is stealing a courthouse with paperwork. By noon, the freeze on rectangular stamp warrants had reached the bank. Teller Kent posted a notice behind the rear window. No payment on Order of County Court vouchers without the treasurer's countersign. Sheriff Caro had the Dobbs embosser locked in evidence. The schoolhouse closet held ribbon scraps, a roll of blue binding, and a small rubber stamp kit that could build a rectangle in 10 minutes. Judge's secretary, Lena Paxton, scheduled a full after-hours inventory of the basement record room. She handed Janitor Pike a written instruction. At 6 in the evening, unlock the record room for the inventory crew only, list names, and keep the key on his belt. Telegraph operator Coalfield sat with the month's fresh challenge table beside his key. Just before 6, a wire arrived from the West Line. Court 2 orders transfer of case files to secure room. Approve entry at 6. There was no challenge phrase and no county billing. Coalfield sent a short alert to Voss. Unauthorized directive received. No code. West Station. Voss read it in the recorder's office and told Ruth to stop all movement until he stood in the basement himself. At 6, Mr. Pike opened the record room door. He wrote his own name on the top line of the key log and left a blank column for visitors. 3 people arrived with a sheet of paper and a cart. Hiram Lowe with his soft hat, a broad-shouldered man Pike did not know, and Agnes Pell in the black hat. Pell showed Pike a printed order headed Court Auxiliary Committee, Transfer for Audit. The body copied the judge's format. The seal in the corner read, Seal of the County Court. Pike compared it to the instruction Lena had given him. They did not match. He told the trio to wait in the hall. Pell smiled and asked him to sign a receipt anyway, so she would not have to bother him later. Pike refused and pointed at the blank visitor column until they wrote their names. Voss and Caro came down the stairs fast enough to make the walls carry sound. Voss took the transfer for audit paper and held it to the lamp. The watermark looked correct. The serial number matched the week's run. The seal emboss matched the Dobbs die, now in evidence. The judge's signature was perfect. The date was today. He looked at the binding margin and found the small day letter D. It was Thursday's stock. Today was Monday. He handed the paper back without comment and told Pike to open the door under his own key and stand in the doorway while anyone was inside. Record rooms are weak because they run on trust and habit. Boxes lived on shelves marked by year and case type. Civil, criminal, grand jury, road district, liquor board. Ruth laid a ledger on the table and began an inventory by column. She wrote a box number, a case range, and whether the ribbon was intact. Lyman stood beside her to count aloud, so the list would be double-marked. Lena took the judge's minute book from the top shelf and placed it near her chair to keep it from walking. Caro stood behind the new arrivals and watched hands. Agnes Pell headed straight to the liquor board section. She picked up a box labeled Licenses, January to March, and asked in a neutral tone where the April minutes were stored. Ruth pointed to the next shelf. Lowe wheeled the cart to the civil shelf and placed his hand on a box labeled Road District Assessments, East. The broad-shouldered man moved toward the juror forms shelf. Caro stopped him with a single finger and asked who had authorized any movement of anything. The man said, Court 2. Caro asked for a badge. The man said he was auxiliary. Caro said auxiliary was frozen. The man put both hands back on the cart rail. Coalfield's assistant, a young operator from the depot, arrived with a second slip from the west line. Seal room moved to schoolroom tonight. It was the same phrase Coalfield had saved weeks earlier, sent again, paid cash. Voss placed the slip on the table beside the forged transfer. He told Lena to read the exact wording of the judge's afternoon order about the inventory. Lena read it aloud. Inventory to be supervised by clerk and treasurer. No removal of boxes. Any exceptions by written order from this bench only. Ruth copied the sentence into her ledger margin. Voss now set a simple trap. He picked 3 random boxes, 1 civil, 1 liquor, 1 grand jury. He pressed a wax pellet on the top seam of each, stamped the wax with the judge's desk seal in front of everyone, and wrote the time beside the stamp. He told everyone in the room that any box with a broken pellet would be treated as tampered. He then asked Pike to bring a fresh stack of blank receipt forms and write "No removal" across the top. The broad-shouldered man glanced at Pell. Pell paid no attention. She watched Ruth's pen and Ruth's eyes. She saw which shelf held the juror summons forms for the next court term. Those forms are powerful because they call citizens into service and shape juries. A person holding them can stall a term or stack a panel. She reached toward that shelf. Caro shifted his stance so she could not pass without touching his jacket. Showalter, the printer, came down the stairs with his hat in his hands. He had a locked drawer key on a string and a color that suggested he had left his press without finishing a run. He told Voss that the official die in his drawer was gone. The drawer lock was intact. The drawer contained the tray and the felt pad. The die was missing. Voss asked when he had last used it. Showalter said this morning, on a marriage license. He had returned it to the tray and shut the drawer. He had posted a boy at the door when he went to deliver paper to the treasurer. The boy had gone for water. The drawer had been shut when he returned. Voss asked whether anyone else had a key. Showalter said no. Voss asked whether the die could be removed without unlocking the drawer. Showalter said not, without breaking the wood. The wood was not broken. Lena, who had been quiet since she took the minute book down, looked at the judge's desk seal and the empty tray in Showalter's hand, and made a connection the men had not made yet. 2 dies now existed in the world. The counterfeit daubs die in evidence, and the missing official die from the print room. One could make numbers follow money. The other could make judgeship appear in ink wherever someone carried it. She put the minute book back on the table and told Ruth to write in big letters next to the inventory time, "Official die missing from print room." The room got smaller. Voss asked Pike whether anyone had used the print room after lunch. Pike said yes. A woman with a black hat had asked for permission to emboss a stack of meeting agendas because the judge's secretary was too busy. Pike said she had a key on a ribbon and walked as if she owned everything under her feet. Lena said she had not given a key to anyone. Pike hung his head. Voss asked whether Pike had signed her in. Pike said he had not because she had smiled and said it would be just a second. Lena wrote 2 words on a scrap and slid it to Voss. Agnes Pell. Voss did not show the scrap to anyone. He told Pike to go lock the print room and stand in the doorway. At 7:14 p.m., the first attempt to move the courthouse began. Lowe pushed the cart toward the hall door and said he had permission to carry liquor board minutes to a secure room. Voss asked for the written order from this bench. Lowe held up the transfer for audit paper. Voss wrote, "Thursday paper used Monday" across the face and handed it back. He told Pike to close the record room door and hold the key. He told Lowe to return the cart to the center of the room. Lowe obeyed. Pell took a different route. She walked to the judge's minute book and placed her hand on it as if it were a church Bible. Lena stepped between Pell and the book and said nothing. Pell removed her hand. At 7:26 p.m., a second message hit the telegraph office. It came from the North Spur station and read, "Judge authorizes Court 2 to secure die and records." Colefield's assistant brought it down the stairs at a run. Lena read it once and pointed to the month's challenge table. The wire contained the wrong counter for today's date. It was a cheap forgery. Voss wrote "wrong counter" on the slip and pinned it to the forged transfer with a straight pin he borrowed from Ruth's sleeve. Ruth's inventory reached the juror's shelf. The box labeled "panel fall term" had a ribbon knot that felt new. She set it on the table and weighed it in her hands. It was too light for a full panel. She cut the ribbon and opened the lid. Inside lay old blank summons from last year with the county name printed in an older font. The current panel was missing. Ruth said it soft and then louder so the list would hear it. Panel forms gone. Lyman wrote the time and the words in the margin of the inventory sheet. Caro asked Pike who had been in the room on Friday after 4 in the afternoon. Pike checked his keybook. The entry read, "Court Auxiliary Committee." The hand was tidy with the old-style long S in session. He had not asked for a judge's order. He had not asked for the clerk. He had left them for just a minute. Ruth looked at Agnes Pell's hands. Ink rimmed the gloves. Voss changed posture. He stopped asking questions and started freezing pathways. He told Lyman to telephone the bank and order a hold on any box or envelope labeled "Court Auxiliary" if presented before morning. He told Caulfield to send 1 wire to the circuit clerk with a challenge and 1 to the state printer asking whether any county had ordered juror forms this week. He told Merritt to refuse any prisoner presented by an auxiliary signature and to telegraph him before accepting anyone on a Court 2 order. He told Pike to bring the building's spare chains. Pike brought them. They chained the record room door with the boxes inside. They logged the chain and the time. Showalter returned to his press and checked every chase and drawer. He found a scrap of felt with fresh impressions of the official die on it, pressed hard and neat, as if someone had practiced before leaving the room. He found a sliver of wax on the floor under the drawer, the same red that the judge used. On a shelf, he found a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. Inside lay a rectangular rubber stamp reading Order of County Court, and a second reading Clerk by Direction. He carried them to Voss. Voss put them in evidence and wrote their exact wording into Ruth's ledger. At 8:03 p.m., the deputy posted at the bank rear door sent a boy with a note. A woman in a black hat had appeared at the side door, carrying a leather case and asking for the court paymaster. Teller Kent said the bank was closed under court order. The woman left, heading south toward the schoolhouse. Caro sent 2 men, one to the schoolhouse and one to Dobbs's office. The schoolhouse room was empty except for wax strips, ribbon scraps, and a folded timetable page under a chair with a note. Session moved. Use West Room. Dobbs's office held Dobbs, who said he knew nothing and tried to keep his hands from shaking. The drawer that had held the tray of badges now held a fresh stack of tissue paper cut to badge size. At 8:27 p.m., Pike heard a door at the far end of the basement. Someone had used the exterior coal chute to enter the boiler corridor. Caro and 2 deputies moved toward the sound. They found the broad-shouldered man from the cart and a second man with a sack. The sack held the missing judge's panel forms and 2 blank warrant books. Caro did not argue the law in the corridor. He took the sack and walked the men upstairs. He logged the seizure, wrote the time, and handed the sack to Ruth without letting it out of his hands until she wrote a receipt. The last action of the night was small and told the truth. Coalfield's challenge to the circuit court came back with the correct response word and counter. The circuit clerk added a sentence that mattered. No Court 2 exists. Lena read that line twice. The people trying to move the courthouse had given their scheme a name. It was not a court, and it had no bench. It ran on borrowed seals, rented rooms, and hours when men got sloppy. Voss took the forged transfer, the wrong counter wire, the recovered panel forms, the rubber rectangles, and the felt with fresh die impressions and laid them in one straight row on the judge's table. He wrote one request in a neat hand: freeze of all record movement, seizure of any auxiliary keys, and immediate inventory of the print room under lock with 2 witnesses. The judge signed. Ruth wrote the order in the docket. Pike turned the key and put it in his pocket. Set one hard rule for today. Only 3 things matter in this room: admissible exhibits, live testimony that ties those exhibits to hands and dates, and a clear chain of custody. Everything else is noise. The courtroom fills before 10. On the defense bench sit Agnes Pell from the Liquor Board, Land Agent Sully Dobbs, Runner Hiram Lowe, and the broad-shouldered man from the basement corridor who gives his name as Rusk. Each has counsel. Judge Harrow takes the bench. There is no Court 2. The order on the wall reads simply, County Court in Session. The clerk swears the witnesses. The bailiff places a long evidence table within reach of the judge. County Attorney Abram Voss opens with a plain sequence. He says the state will prove a counterfeit seal was used to issue orders and pay ghost deputies, that a second payroll was laundered through a bank rear office, that official records were targeted for illegal transfer, and that the county's official die went missing while the counterfeit die operated in town. He says every exhibit will be tied to a person, a time, and a signature. Ruth Eller takes the stand first. She testifies to receiving 2 versions of Order 2179 with different embosses and the same number, date, and signature. She identifies both sheets and points to the captions on each seal. She explains the office practice on watermarks, ribbon colors, and hand-stamped day letters hidden under the binding. She reads her own docket entries for that day. She describes the basement inventory and the moment she found the juror panel box light. She confirms that she wrote "panel forms gone" in the margin, and that she logged each wax pellet the county attorney set on box seams. Voss moves to admit Exhibits 1 through 6. Both orders, Ruth's docket page, the inventory ledger sheet, the janitor's key log for Monday night, and the photograph of the counterfeit emboss. The judge admits them. Defense reserves cross. Printer Showalter follows. He identifies the county's official die by dimensions and design. He testifies that he keeps the die in a locked drawer and that on the night of the basement inventory, the die was missing from the drawer, which was found shut and unbroken. He shows where his coin pressure marks appear on forms he prints and points them out on both 2179s. He explains the hand-stamped day letter practice and says the second seal, 2179, carries a Thursday letter on a Monday date. He produces 2 rubber rectangles found in his shop. Order of County Court and Clerk by Direction, and the felt with fresh impressions of the official die. He testifies he did not cut those stamps and does not own that exact rectangle wording. The judge admits the rectangles and felt as Exhibits 7, 8, and 9. The defense asks whether any other person could have placed those items in his shop. Showalter says the shop was unattended for a few minutes while he delivered paper and that a woman in a black hat entered to emboss agendas. He says the janitor later confirmed her presence. He refuses to guess who brought the stamps. Blacksmith Harlan testifies that he filled a cash order for 9-star badges 2 months ago. He shows his spacing pattern and matches the rope edge on the sample star provided by the buyer to the rope motif seen on the counterfeit seal's border. He notes that the buyer declined badge numbers. Exhibits 10 and 11 are the paper pattern and one of the recovered badges from Dobbs's cabinet. Defense suggests the badges were for a play. Harlan answers that he does not ask why a buyer wants metal. Treasurer Lyman brings the payroll books. He testifies to the main register of sworn deputies with badge numbers and signatures, and to the pass-through court auxiliary ledger with 9 names paid twice monthly. He shows that the auxiliary entries carry a rubber rectangular stamp and went to the bank rear office instead of the pay window. He compares numbers and shows the auxiliary line total always sits just under the amount that would trigger a newspaper note. He points to 2 small printing and forms vouchers posted the day after each auxiliary run, with the same rectangular stamp and a bank teller initial. Exhibits 12 through 16 are the auxiliary pages, the bank-stamped stubs, and the 2 small vouchers. The judge admits them. Bank teller Kent testifies that on auxiliary days he paid a single envelope to Court Auxiliary Paymaster, signed for by H. Lowe, then broke the bills into 9 bundles. He says those transactions took place in the rear office at the request of a woman in a black hat who sometimes stood in the doorway. He identifies his own K initial on the margins. He describes the paymaster as a man with a soft hat and a scar on his left cheek. He identifies Hiram Lowe at the defense table. Exhibit 17 is the rear office log. The judge admits it. Defense asks whether Kent confirmed badge numbers. Kent says he did not, because the county warrant named only the paymaster. Jailer Merritt confirms that no intake or release in the last 30 days lists an arresting officer from the auxiliary roster. He reads the arresting officer column aloud. The names are sworn deputies only. He says he would have telephoned or telegraphed the sheriff if an unknown officer signed a commitment. Exhibit 18 is the intake page covering the period. Admitted. Telegraph operator Caulfield explains the county challenge and acknowledgement system. He reads the month's challenge table into the record. He testifies that no challenge was sent for the second seal orders and that 2 unauthorized wires came from the West and North Spur stations. Seal room moved, and judge authorizes court 2. Both paid cash and both with wrong or missing counters. He identifies the slips that he and his assistant carried downstairs on the night of the inventory. Exhibits 19 and 20 are admitted. Defense asks whether someone could guess a counter. Caulfield says the table changes monthly and that guesses without tables fail often. Janitor Pike brings the schoolhouse ledger and the basement key book. He testifies he rented the schoolroom at night 3 times to Court Auxiliary Committee, cash, and writes that the renter wrote with an old-style long S in session. He testifies he unlocked the basement record room at 6 for the official inventory and refused to sign any receipt for a forged transfer. He says he wrote the names of Agnes Pell, Hiram Lowe, and an unknown man in the visitor column before Voss arrived. He admits he allowed a woman in a black hat into the print room earlier that day without a written order and did not sign her in. He says he believed she was acting for the court. Exhibits 21 and 22 are the schoolhouse ledger page and the basement keybook for that date. Admitted. Sheriff Caro testifies to 3 straight points. First, he never swore the 9 auxiliary men as deputies and issued no badge numbers to them. Second, his supply book shows no ammunition, belt, or cuff draws for those names during the pay periods. Third, he seized from a sack in the basement corridor the missing juror panel forms and 2 blank warrant books. He logged the seizure and handed the sack to the clerk for receipt. He identifies the counterfeit die found previously in Dobbs's office as the embosser he removed and logged on warrant. He identifies the tray of 7 badges found in Dobbs's cabinet. Exhibits 23 through 27 are the supply pages, the seizure log, the panel forms, the blank warrant books, and photographs of the counterfeit die and badges. Admitted. Lena Paxton testifies to the judge's written inventory order that barred any removal of boxes except by written order from that bench. She testifies she gave no one a key to the print room that day and did not authorize any off-site embossing. She reads the response from the circuit clerk that answered the county's challenge correctly and added, in writing, "No Court 2 exists." Exhibit 28 is the response wire. Admitted. Defense objects to the last sentence as hearsay. The judge overrules. The wire is a governmental record. With the record built, Voss calls the defendants one by one. Dobbs declines to testify. Lowe says he carried envelopes and signed Paymaster because he was asked to and because he trusted Dobbs. He says he did not know the envelopes held county wages. He admits putting the packet into a wagon where Agnes Pell sat. He denies knowing about badges. Rusk says he was hired to move boxes on instruction from auxiliary clerks and thought it was lawful because the paper looked official. He denies touching seals. Agnes Pell takes the stand after consulting with counsel. Voss asks direct questions. Did she rent the schoolroom under Court Auxiliary Committee? She says she rented the room for temperance meetings and must have written the wrong header once. Did she handle county warrant cash in the bank rear office? She says she stood in the doorway for a charity collection and did not touch envelopes. Did she carry the tray of star badges in the wagon? She says the tray was for a pageant. Did she ask the janitor for the print room without a written order? She says she merely checked whether the official seal was available for agendas. Did she sign the school ledger A. Pell? She looks at the page and says, yes, that is her hand. Did she know the counterfeit embosser in Dobbs's office? She says she thought it was legitimate court property stored for safety. Her answers are short and always framed as misunderstandings and favors. Defense cross-examines the county's witnesses. They probe the missing official die and suggest the county lost it itself, then invented a counterfeit story to cover negligence. They say the auxiliary roster is a lawful committee of citizens assisting the court. They argue that a rectangular stamp is a convenience, not fraud. They say the bank's practice of paying a paymaster is not illegal. They try to raise jurisdiction, claiming only the state attorney general can prosecute misuse of a seal. Judge Harrow cuts that short. He says the court will hear state counts already charged, obtaining property by false pretenses, filing false instruments, unlawful possession and use of a public seal, and attempted tampering with public records. He says postal and federal questions are elsewhere. Voss calls one more witness, a state engraver from the printing office. The engraver brings microscope photographs of embossed depths and edge profiles. He testifies the counterfeit die in Dobbs's office is not an imperfect copy of the official die, but a separate die cut from a simplified drawing. The eagle lacks feather cross-hatching near the beak. The rope border is tighter. The ring depth is constant, unlike the official die that shows slight variance from years of use. He says a person with both dies could generate two classes of paper, one that looks more formal to laymen and one that looks legal to a trained clerk, depending on the room they wanted to command. He adds that the counterfeit die was cut recently because the tool marks are clean. He puts dates within one season. Exhibit 29 is his plate of microphotos. Admitted. The state's case pauses. The judge asks defense whether it will call witnesses. Dobbs's counsel calls no one and moves for dismissal, saying no exhibit links Dobbs to a forged order or a counterfeit die. The judge denies the motion and points to Caro's warrant seizure of the die from Dobbs's office and the tray of badges in his cabinet. Lowe's counsel calls Farm and Mercantile's manager to say a paymaster practice is common when organizations run group pay. The judge says common practice does not make misuse of county funds lawful. Pell's counsel calls a liquor board member to say Pell is diligent and has managed records for years. The judge says character witnesses do not answer why counterfeit stamps and off-night rentals were used. Two events tighten the case before closing arguments. First, Deputy Tate steps in with a wrapped parcel recovered from the schoolhouse chimney cleanout. Inside is the county's missing official die, wrapped in a rag with ash and flecks of wax. The serial file marks match Showalter's log of repairs. Showalter identifies it at a glance. The judge has the die logged as Exhibit 30 and placed beside the counterfeit. Second, Coalfield brings a late wire from the state printer. It confirms no order for juror forms was placed by the county this week. It also flags an attempted order from a private sender using county language, refused by the printer because the sender could not provide the monthly challenge. Exhibit 31 is the printer's refusal. Admitted. Voss keeps closing short. He lays Exhibits 1 through 31 in 3 rows. Counterfeit orders, auxiliary payroll, and bank logs, records movement attempt, and die evidence. He says the case is plain. Defendants used a counterfeit seal and off-night rooms to generate orders that moved money. They built a ghost payroll and paid it through a bank's rear window. When the county froze the practice, they tried to move records and replace juror forms to control a term. They covered the paper with 2 stamps and 2 dies. They did not send challenges because they did not know the code table. They used people who understood rooms and keys. He asks the court to bind all 4 defendants over to the grand jury on all counts and to issue immediate orders to purge the auxiliary from county books, to invalidate any document bearing the counterfeit emboss or rectangular stamp, and to post a public notice that no Court 2 exists. Defense argues confusion, not conspiracy. They say the county ran sloppy shops and now looks for scapegoats. They point to the janitor's unlocked moment, to the printer's unattended shop, to the bank's own choices. They say the counterfeit dye's presence in Dobbs's office proves only that Dobbs was holding property for the county after the print room was compromised. They say choir pageants and temperance meetings use badges. They say a clerk's long S is not a crime. Judge Harrow does not give a speech. He issues findings on the record item by item. He finds probable cause on the counterfeit seal count, citing exhibits 1, 2, 7, 8, 9, 23, 29, and 30. He finds probable cause on obtaining property by false pretenses, citing exhibits 12 through 17 and the rear office practice with H. Lowe as paymaster. He finds probable cause on unlawful attempted removal and tampering with public records, citing exhibits 21, 22, 24 through 27, and the telegraph slips 19 and 20. He finds that the phrase Court 2 represents an invented label used to pressure doors. He orders Pell and Dobbs remanded into custody, Rusk held on bond with travel restrictions, and Lowe released on bond to compel testimony. He orders the sheriff to inventory and seal Dobbs's office, the schoolroom closet, and any lockers used by Pell at the liquor board. He orders the treasurer to strike the auxiliary ledger and publish a notice to creditors that any warrants bearing the rectangular stamp are void. He orders the clerk to affix a warning at the top of the public index. Documents embossed "Seal of the County Court" between specific dates are not issued by this bench. He signs the orders with the recovered official die pressed beside his name. Lena Paxton steps forward with a purge list. She reads titles fast while Ruth checks the shelves. The bailiff moves the defendants through the side door. Caro assigns a deputy to the bank rear office until the notice runs in the paper. Coalfield files the printer's refusal in the county's telegraph book as a future check. Showalter returns the official die to his locked drawer and writes a new chain of custody card for it with the judge's signature. Lyman posts a card in the treasurer's window that says auxiliary vouchers will not be paid under any name. Voss writes a 2-sentence notice for the front door. No Court 2. Challenge all orders without counters. The ink dries on his blotter while the clerk dates the purge list and files it in the docket.